It is finally that time of year again. Spooky season has begun. Welcome to my second annual horror movie reviews. Honestly, I need to come up with a permanent title for this series, so I'm opening the comments up. Comment any suggestions on what this series should be called. It really doesn't feel like a year ago when I decided to review horror movies every October. So, for this episode, I'm gonna start off light. I'm gonna review the 1984 classic, Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is directed by Ivan Reitman, and it stars Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Ernie Hudson. This film is the perfect definition of lightning in a bottle. This film should have failed. It should have faded away into 80s obscurity. It should have been really stupid, but you know what? It was really good, and this film is the definition of a miracle. On paper, this movie sounds really stupid. 4 guys running around New York City with nuclear reactors strapped to their back, trapping ghosts. Sounds really dumb, but this film worked for some reason. After watching this film, yet again for the purposes of this review, I still had trouble trying to pinpoint what makes this movie work, what makes it good, and I'm going to try to explain that. I'm going to attempt to explain what makes Ghostbusters a great film. I mean, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint exactly what makes this film work. You kind of have to see it for yourself to really understand. And as always, this review will contain spoilers to Ghostbusters. So if you've never seen this film and you want to avoid any and all spoilers, and you want my spoiler-free thoughts, skip to this annotation. I will also leave a link in the description that you can skip to. But I mean, if you've never seen Ghostbusters, why are you still here? You should really make watching Ghostbusters a priority. There is no divine reason why Ghostbusters works. I mean, there is one main reason, which I will get to by the end, but it's mostly a mix of multiple things. The stars kind of perfectly aligned for this movie. And the first thing I'm going to discuss that really works in this movie is the cast. Each individual cast member absolutely kills it in their role, especially the 4 Ghostbusters. Egon and Ray are kind of the brains of the operation. Egon is the most brainy out of the 4, while Ray is very brainy, but he's more goofy than Egon is, if you know what I mean. Peter Venkman is the most outgoing and charismatic out of these 4. He is kind of the glue that holds the Ghostbusters together. Sometimes he comes across as a jerk, but not in an annoying way, if you know what I mean. His character is still really likable. I feel like any other actor other than Bill Murray would have made this character incredibly unlikable and borderline insufferable. But Bill Murray brings a certain endearing quality to the Venkman character. And honestly, I think he might be the most entertaining character in this film. Winston is the working class character. We have these 3 extremely weird and quirky personalities. While Winston, even though his personality might be conceived as a little weaker, he brings more of an outside perspective to the 3 other Ghostbusters. And honestly, it's kind of refreshing to see a character who I guess is more relatable. Even though his personality isn't as strong as the other 3 Ghostbusters, his character is just as strong, if you know what I mean. Annie Potts as the receptionist Janine is also a pretty underrated character. Her character is actually pretty funny. There's also this awesome dynamic between her and Egon. It's pretty clear that there's some romantic tension, if you know what I mean. And that dynamic provides quite a few good laughs. This film has a perfect tone to it. It has the right amount of camp and the right amount of scares to it. Even though it's mostly a comedy, This film isn't afraid to dive a little bit into the horror genre, stray a little bit in that direction. This film isn't what I would consider scary. I mean, I'm a pretty tough scare. I have a pretty high tolerance for horror movies. But there are some scenes that might be a little frightening to some very young viewers, but I digress. There's a pretty direct reference to the film The Exorcist, the film that a lot of people consider the scariest movie of all time, even though this reference is kind of, I guess, parody of that film. But this film isn't afraid to make some references to some actual horror movies. Also, characters aren't afraid to acknowledge the stupidity of this situation. I mean, the people of New York at the beginning of this film react the way you would expect to a bunch of guys running around with nuclear reactors strapped to their backs, catching and trapping ghosts, and calling themselves the Ghostbusters. This film actually has a surprising amount of heart to it. In the scene where our four main characters agree to cross streams and no, not at the men's urinal, this action would probably result in their deaths, and they know this, and so they decide to say their goodbyes to each other. I mean, even watching this film for the first time, I obviously knew that they weren't gonna kill off the Ghostbusters, but I still felt the weight and levity to this situation every time I watched this movie.
But I think the main reason why this film works so well is because it's just so much fun. There's a certain amount of energy and overall fun just bleeding out of this movie. This is one of those movies that it's just impossible to hate. This film is just a blast from beginning to end, and I always have a blast watching this movie. There's just something about it. There's just an unexplainable quality about it. There's just an unexplained funness to it. Can you nitpick the hell out of it? Probably, but I'm not gonna do that, because this film is just so much fun, and I always have a blast watching this movie. 10 times out of 10, after watching this movie, I always get a really good feeling. And because of that, Ghostbusters gets an A.
Anyways, I hope you enjoyed my review of Ghostbusters. And if you did, make sure to give this video a like. And if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell notification so you can be notified every time I upload a new video. And shout out to Tom Dickinson and A-Trax. Thanks for watching.